to the Dignity Dialogue with your host, Joe Kittinger.
Yes, it's another Dignity Dialogue. I'm Joe Kittinger. Along with me is a wonderful April.
Hey, hey.
And we have a special guest today. Her name is Kristen Donnelly with Abbey Research. And Kristen's focus, one of her many focuses, is empathy. And Kristen, I want to welcome you to our podcast on the Dignity Dialogue.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, it's an honor for you to, show up and share this knowledge. The half hour we spent together, Kristen, April, and I with you, you really helped define empathy in a way that we haven't really heard before. So maybe you could, a little bit of your background, introduce yourself to the group and your background, your company, and then you can get into this idea of empathy, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, part of a family business that has, and therefore a family, because you rarely can separate those things, that has always been very concerned with how do we provide food, clothing, and shelter for every human? How do we meet basic needs so that every human can embody the dignity that they are inherently born with? And so that for my father, for many years, that meant owning and operating and running a manufacturing plant that now my brother has taken over, and a network of companies that now my brother and I co-own. And all along, I've been taught from the very beginning that it does not matter where you are born or the choices that you make or anything else. You are a human who deserves as many chances as you want to live the life that you deserve and you want. So my path to helping people do that has been for a long time through academia. I have a master's of social work degree and a master's of cross-cultural religious anthropology. I have a PhD in sociology. And all that means is that I have had these burning questions my whole life about how do people live together? How do they get along? How do we make this human thing happen? So I spent a while chasing those answers in formal education. And when I earned my PhD, my brother and I talked about me moving back home. I was doing my PhD overseas, and I had met my husband over in Northern Ireland where I was living. So my husband and I emigrating back to Philadelphia and joining the family business and starting a division that would ask questions about how humans get along, but also provide training to other organizations that are looking to get along better, honestly. We've learned a lot as a company here. I've learned a lot through my formal education and my years as a youth worker. And so we decided to create a division called Abbey Research. All the companies are called Abbey. So Abbey Research seeks to help you human better, really, is what it comes down to. Humaning is incredibly difficult. We don't give it enough credit, and we always assume that everyone knows how to do it. And that's not true, especially in corporate environments or nonprofit or teamwork, where you've got a lot of different people together, and you probably haven't laid the groundwork to help them actually work together well. So at Abbey Research, we come in and we offer corporate training around, the businessy words are, turnover prevention and retention strategies and all of that stuff. But fundamentally, what we do is help everyone understand each other better so that they can work together better. Sure. And it all sounds really kindergarten. And it kind of is, because we've forgotten as we adult a whole lot of the real basic things about humanity, which is listen more, talk less, ask more questions, make less assumptions, be rabidly curious. And where that kind of manifests for us is our definition of empathy, which is that empathy is a mental framework of understanding, where you intentionally choose to understand yourself and others as you journey through life together.
What a beautiful...
Yeah, I love that.
Look at that. And this, did you say rabidly curious? Radically curious? What did you say about curious?
Rabidly curious. Yeah, rabidly curious.
Tell us about rabidly curious.
Oh, gosh, you are the 4-year-old who asks why all the time about every sort of thing in your life. My father's now run a lot of very successful businesses. And when entrepreneurship students ask him, like, what makes you a successful business person? I'm sure they expect him to say like an MBA or, a lot of startup capital. He always says curiosity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And
Because when you own a business, you can, like it comes down to like, what's that smell? Why is the toilet backing up? Up to like, why is my employee who's always happy not? What's going on with our sales numbers? Why is this thing that I think should happen not happening? So you just don't assume that you understand anything. And instead you question it. In academia, we say that the best research projects lead to more questions.
Correct.
And that's kind of a way that this manifests as well. You just begin to have a framework where you don't really understand the world, but you're desperate to do so.
I love that. I love that.
And I love helping you human better.
Yes. We could all use help humaning.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
And this
absolutely.
idea of intentionality. So is there like when you think of intentionality around the subject of empathy, are there like key areas to start focusing in on if someone wants to really increase their empathy? Is it like a stage program? Like first you got to eat, then you got to drink water, then you need shelter, and then you need respect, and then anything around that with empathy and how you train it, I guess.
It's a great question, and the answer is like yes, and because it's different for every person.
Okay.
So at all times you should be practicing empathy on yourself, seeking to understand yourself better, because very few of us truly understand us. And every time we learn something about somebody else, it usually triggers something in us, and it becomes this beautiful kind of symbiotic circle. But the thing in terms of empathy for other people and curiosity in other people, where should you start? Start with the thing that makes you say, I wonder. So the story that we tell is that in early 2001, there were the terrorist attack shootings at the spas in Atlanta, Georgia. And my partner and best friend, Aaron, the other good doctor of Abbey research, the two of us realized that we knew very, very little about the Asian American community, like very little. And we thought we thought we knew. And then when we really started digging into it, we're like, oh, we're kind of lost. So we went to a friend of ours who happened to be married to a Cambodian immigrant and very active in the Cambodian community where she lived. And I said, so what should we do? What should we look at? And she was like, oh, well, I'm sure you've seen the PBS documentary. And I was like, pause. What PBS documentary? What are you talking about? And we found out that there is literally a 6-hour documentary on PBS in the United States that traces the arrival, creation, and growth of the Asian American community and communities within the United States. Wow. So I was like, cool, I'll start there. So I gave 6 hours of my life. I sat down, I watched this thing. I learned so much that I never knew. I found more people to follow on Twitter and Instagram. I ordered different books. I made sure to pay attention to different things. And in that 6 hours, my brain opened just a little bit. And there was all of these different ways that I now understood that other people human in other ways. Mm-hmm. So pick a thing. The beautiful thing about being alive right now is that as terribly toxic as the internet is, it is also beautiful. And you can find the answer to almost every question. So have you heard, for instance, about these residential schools in Canada where they're finding lots of mass graves? And so maybe you don't know anything about that. Do some quick Google search. CBC Canada the Canadian Broadcasting Company has so many resources out there to help you understand what residential schools were in Canada. And then if you're really brave, find out what they were here in the United States. What if you know somebody who's celiac and you actually don't know what that is and you feel kind of embarrassed? Google it. Discover exactly what that is and figure it out. Pick something you're curious about and chase it. You are not going to learn the world overnight. That's not the point. The point is to have a posture of curiosity to seek understanding. So when you encounter difference, you choose curiosity instead of defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. Do you think that that part of this process is that people just don't really they just don't want to take the time, or they don't have, we all say, we don't have time. There's such this huge rush on lack of time. Where do you think that falls into play in terms of just being able to understand people better?
Gosh, that's such a beautiful question. We always have time. The thing is how you want to spend your time. So maybe you can't choose this every day, but you could choose it once a week or something like that. I am of the belief that most people are fundamentally good, and that they fundamentally want for their loved ones happiness, safety, joy. If they choose to have children, they certainly want them for that. But there's a lot of stuff that comes with life. And we're also, as biological creatures, programmed to the path of least resistance.
Yes.
And so our bodies want us to be comfortable and safe and in communities that make sense. And so we're biologically kind of programmed to only interact with people we agree with, to only be with people that we look like. And every decision we make to override our biology is a radical change in how we move through the world. We are capable of it, obviously, and we need to do it desperately, but it's work. And so if you're overwhelmed on a daily basis, it is a little bit of work to sit down and watch a documentary. So don't do that. Maybe just add a couple different people to your Instagram stream. If everybody in your Instagram has your exact life, diversify it a little bit. If everybody that you are interacting with on Reddit is only things you care about, maybe throw in one more. And it's one of those things. I know this sounds really silly, but I love hockey, and America is not particularly good at broadcasting hockey to me. But since I got ESPN Plus, I get to watch any hockey game I want as long as ESPN is carrying it. And I usually get to choose the feed that I want. So I've decided to start following the Ottawa Senators, for instance. So I follow the Ottawa Senators and I watch the Ottawa feed. And I'm enjoying hockey. It's great, but I'm hearing the Ottawa perspective on things. I'm seeing their commercials. I'm understanding their concerns and the way they talk about their team and the history of their team. That's silly. Sure, it's hockey. What does it matter? But it reminds me for, an hour and a half every couple days that there are these people in this town called Ottawa, and their lives are different than mine and yet completely the same.
Yep.
And they deserve dignity and respect just like I do. And so I can live my life in a way that invites all of humanity into my human experience instead of excluding people I forget are people.
Oh, yeah. I look at even in business how we, label people by their title. Those engineers, they're always those salespeople.
Yep.
You see this all the time in organizations who are, it's just easier just to label them. Now, let me ask you this. When you talk about understanding someone, where does, or someone going on this journey of increasing empathy or practicing, as you suggested, where does trauma come into that? Like a person's individual experience, does that must make it more difficult, I'm guessing?
It depends on the thing. So very few people are traumatized so permanently that they can't interact with any kind of difference. There are definitely people out there, and they are hopefully in therapeutic, helpful relationships. But most of us are traumatized like in a category or in something, and we can kind of navigate around it. Also, there are journeys through trauma and cycles of trauma. So this all depends on where you are in your trauma recovery or your rewriting or anything else. But we also say that there are certainly things you can tap out on having understanding for. We ask you to not, our suggestion is not to tap out on everything. But for example, my best friend cannot have a logical conversation with somebody who fundamentally does not believe in any level of gun control. Like, she's done the intellectual exercise as far as she can go. She can respect that some people grew up with them. She can do all of that. But she grew up in Colorado, and Columbine happened when she was in 10th grade.
Sure.
And there is no way for her to empathetically engage with folks who think that Columbine was a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something that's going to happen. And so she just taps out. I'm similar. My husband's an immigrant. I've been an immigrant to another country. I have a very difficult time engaging logically with the conversation around borders here in the United States. And so I choose my battles. If I'm in a relationship with somebody and they believe that really different thing that me that's hurtful and traumatic and I can't address it, I draw that boundary with that person. Hey, I love you so much. We're not going to talk about this.
Right.
This is not on the table for discussion. And if they violate that, then what they have proven to you is they don't respect your inherent dignity as a person, and you get to walk away. You get to negotiate that in a different manner. You get to kind of navigate that how you want to navigate it. But more often than not, we don't know about other people because we just forget to learn about them.
Okay. Yeah,
It's not that that group of people has traumatized us.
Right.
It's just that we forgot to do anything about it. And so obviously, please protect yourselves and handle trauma however you need to handle it. It's going to look different for you at different seasons of your life and in different traumas. But in all of my years of helping people do this, it's a lot more often that like, oh, something happens, or like, a hurricane hits Thailand and I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably learn more about Thailand. Like, or this thing happens in my nephew's class and like there's another student with a disorder I've never heard of. And instead of just going, oh, well, that's wrong with that kid, I can choose to Google it and understand and think about what it must be like for their family to live with it. So it's more often not about trauma. I should say this is always when people ask me about race. And that's completely fair and valid. Everyone has a different mileage with this. But I will say that if you are somebody who is white on this planet, you have had institutional and cultural power everywhere for a very long time. And if that statement makes you deeply uncomfortable and your thought is to argue back with me, I would encourage you to consider understanding the racial dynamics around the world as one of your first places that you could start.
I would agree. And I think sometimes people are worried or concerned about asking questions around race. I am a mixed race.
Correct.
My father is from Africa. My mother is Caucasian. And quite often, certainly in the height of some of the things that have happened over the last few years, people have actually been more afraid to ask me a question about race because they don't want, it usually starts with, please don't think I'm a racist, right? Because they're concerned that as soon as I ask a question or I am trying to gain understanding, you're going to think there's something wrong with me because I'm trying to gain understanding. And I think it just goes to the point of how we have gotten so far away from the idea of human is an incredible thing. And we can find out all kinds of wonderful and engaging and just incredible things about one another. But we haven't really taken the time to do that for a lot of years. And now when we come back to this idea of, I want to be able to understand your culture. What was it like to be somebody who, in the midst of hearing things about how white people were bad or black people were bad, and I put a post out on my Facebook saying, which one do you want me to hate? What side of me do you want me to hate? Or how about we just find what's fantastic about both sides? Let's go find what's incredible about another group of people and ourselves. It's okay for me to also see the incredible in me as being Caucasian as well as being African American. And so we've just gotten away from this idea of exploration and exploring. And, I go all over the world. I love to travel. I do lots of mission work. And so I travel, and it is my favorite thing because I have an opportunity for what is just a short amount of time in comparison to someone who lives there, right? I get to step into a culture that I have never been in before, and I get to just experience it and have it happen. That is the most incredible feeling that, for me, that I could ever have, is to have that feeling. It's not for everyone, but you're right. It's so accessible to be able to go to Google, to be able to go to, watch a documentary, find out more about these small villages all over the world, all these kinds of things, because it all funnels into our overall view of humanity,
Yeah, I am a white lady, and I come by it super honestly. I'm Danish and Scottish, like we're really white. But like that's just life. But I am also fat, and that has been an intersection of my life that has marginalized me quite a bit. And I will say from that perspective, I never mind talking about my weight with my friends, and I very rarely, and my perception of myself and like my journey in that. But if some random stranger on the internet who happens to be following me added me on Twitter and told me that I owed them my emotional journey about like, and they started asking me all these questions about myself, I'd get a little salty and I'd be a little bit like, hi, I don't know you. Here is the 95 books that are written about that. Here's the television shows that you can go and access it. Like, I don't need that. And so that it's kind of based up in what both April and I said. Like every human is a human being who has a lot of different entities within them. We call it intersectionality. Everybody is made up of a lot of different things, and every one of those things carries oppression and carries privilege. Full stop, every single one, depending on where you are. If you enter into a conversation or a relationship with somebody only focusing on one of those intersections, oh, I have a fat friend, I should ask her that question. Oh, I've got a mixed race friend, I should ask her that question. Instead of, wow, I really wonder what my friend Kristen feels about this news item that is happening. I should check in on her. Mm-hmm. And I hope you can understand the two differences in that thing, because understanding the inherent worth and dignity with every human being is allowing them to come to your life and in business to come to the table of every decision on their own terms and not in the token that you need them to be there in, because that's your curiosity. So this is where this becomes where you can't just find somebody and ask them to do all your education for you. Mm-hmm. You have to still choose the curiosity. Now, am I honored when friends of mine ask, like, hey, I'm building a restaurant. Like, I want to make sure everybody's really comfortable. What should I be looking for with chairs? Oh my God, I love that. I'm so honored that they thought about that. But remember that keyword, friend.
Right.
And the relationships that we've developed already and kind of all of that stuff. But remembering and keeping in mind that learning is always on us, but it is best done in community. Mm-hmm. So if you come and you've done some of the work and you can ask what's your personal experience with, not, hey, you happen to be Korean, can you tell me the entire story of Korean Americans? Like there's nuances here. And the whole thing, our whole point of empathy is that when we understand ourselves and each other better, our lives get richer, our anxiety gets a lot lower because you really begin to realize what you can and cannot control. And people can be people to you instead of projects, mm-hmm. or instead of tokens, or instead of, election people. People are people. They're not, like you said, all those engineers.
Right.
They're not flat categorizations of stereotypes. Right. They're real life 3D humans that you get to be better because you are in relationship with them. Now, all that being said, this kind of ties back to the trauma. There are people you can't be in a relationship with. This is not a kumbaya thing where I'm now telling you to go around and hug everybody. There are folks that when you learn about them, as the great Dr. Maya Angelou said, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time.
That's right.
Like that's true too. And you can also understand somebody without ever agreeing with them or condoning their actions or behavior. I can understand Vladimir Putin. He's not that complicated. Like he's shown us who he is. I can understand what he's doing and really, really, really disagree with it, mm-hmm. and protest against it and activate against it. Mm-hmm. So understand the difference that understanding is not agreeing with. Understanding is simply, okay, I get why your brain does that.
Mm-hmm. And I disagree with it. That's helpful for me, as you say that, because I think I often will tie in understanding with agreement, where it doesn't have to be that way. No. It's not always that way.
And really, it's quite freeing when you think about it.
Yeah.
To not have to necessarily agree with someone in order to understand them. It's very freeing.
Absolutely. And you're really teaching people how to treat
So much
you
of this
too,
work
and
is
saying,
free.
okay,
Yes.
we're not going to talk about that right now, right? That's a hot button. We're not going to talk about that. That's freeing. Great. Thank you for the rule. I don't want to have to upset you over and over and over again. So you have to tell me, right, that that's the rule.
We talk a lot about empathy around the holidays.
Yes.
And one of the things that we always say is like, if like there are families you can't have this conversation with, and so therefore just take care of yourself the best that you can. But if you are in a situation where you can say, guys, we can't this year. Like, this is not a topic. I don't want to hear about school board elections this year. Or I really can't talk about the Supreme Court. It's really too emotional. What I'd really love to do instead is has everyone seen The Voice? Like, or can we talk about like what's really fun happening in our lives? Yeah. Like, there are ways to reframe the conversation. If you're scared of in America, if you're scared of Thanksgiving dinner, legitimately come up with an activity where everybody gets to say what they're thankful for. Mm-hmm. And that's cheesy and fifth grade, maybe, but that's something to talk about at the dinner table instead of who just won the midterms.
Right.
So a little bit of forethought, a little bit of forethought. And if you can trust the room that you all generally care about each other, if not even love each other, we can kind of do this. There are families where that's not possible. And then, like I said, protect yourself the best you can, have a friend to call in the bathroom after the pie course. But there are ways we can talk about this. There are ways that we can do it. And if you're brave, start asking questions. Why do you think that conspiracy theory? Why do you believe that? Why is that matter so important to you? And if you don't have the bandwidth for that, that's fine. Watch football. There's a lot of it.
So Kristen, empathy obviously is a part of a greater work, that you bring to the world. And I'm thinking of myself as a business owner, right? Like a business owner, they're like, I really need to bring more empathy into the company. I don't know if they talk that way. I don't know. You know what I mean? Right there, I'm doing it again. But like what is happening in an organization when people ask you for help? Like what are they seeing that's happening in the organization to identify we need some sort of training here?
There's usually a lot of conflict. And there's some sort of people management problem. So it's a high gossip culture. They have a lot of turnover. There's a lot of people complaining about, certain things. You have, in the last couple of years, especially, oh my gosh, now we're hybrid or we've had to go fully remote and I don't know how to do team meetings anymore. There seems to be a lot of disconnection. So honestly, like a lot of the calls that we get start with something feels off and I don't know why. Or I know this drama with this person is affecting our bottom line, but I can't fire them. Can you help me fix it? Or these two people have been at each other's throats and the rest of us don't know what to do. I've tried everything the internet told me to try. Can you come in and help us get along better? So it's a lot. It's usually that kind of stuff. But honestly, sometimes it's also proactive. It's they hear me talk at a conference and they're like, oh, that's a good foundation to set. They hear me on a podcast and they email in and they say, I'd really love, as we're going into this next year, I really love for you to talk about how we treat our clients with empathy. Financial services people especially ask that question. How do I get more out of my clients? How do I build trust? Broken trust is usually how a lack of empathy manifests. So however broken trust looks like in your organization, having us help you build a culture of empathy will fix that broken trust.
Ooh, I like that. That makes good sense. And it fits so well, frankly, with what we do. It just it's such an enhanced. I just feel like as you've been talking about empathy, of course, we talk about it in reference to emotional intelligence and just how do we treat each other, right? And kind of that difference between sympathy and empathy and some of those kinds of things. But it's just such a great connection and combination of understanding human dignity, understanding that there are things that drive people, there are ways that people see the world, and we have to be open to be able to have those dialogues with them whether that's in a one-on-one or it's over coffee or having lunch or whatever it might be, right? Working next to them on the line. We have to be able to understand that we're all different, and we all really, at the very core of who we are, is our human dignity. And I've just recognized where empathy fits into that so beautifully.
Yeah.
And that's really neat.
No, it's been awesome. You've been a wonderful guest on our podcast as we strive to bring dignity to the world, and your message certainly fits perfectly right in that, Kristen. So I really want to thank you for being on our show. And if folks want to contact you, how would they best find you?
Our website is argooddoctors.com. All lowercase, all words just running together, argooddoctors.com. You can find everything you need there, including our newsletter and our email and how to get a hold of me directly.
That's awesome. Kristen, thanks so much for just being authentically you. It's been a delight.
It absolutely has. I can tell you've done your research and you're passionate about your subject. And so we are grateful for your time.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for yours as well. And I love what you guys are doing. So this is an honor to be here.
Wonderful. All right, folks. So this has been another Dignity Dialogue with Joe, April, and Kristen. We will see you next month. Have a great month.
See ya.
This has been the Dignity Dialogue with Joe Kittinger. Talk at you later.